It's good to see you again, John. This is our second interview since you've been in Kyiv on what's fast becoming the front line of this war. It's a dangerous place for a lot of people. It's a dangerous place for journalists as well. A few have lost their life already. What's the experience like, and is it different from other wars you've covered?
So, I mean, right now there's a curfew, which it started last night, and it's going to last the whole day until the next morning. And so, right now, the most practical threat to my own life is my appalling cooking ability, which you know. So I'm worried that I might poison myself. I'm going to do duck à l'orange tonight, where we'll see how dreadful that turns out to be. I'm joking. What's happening is that the Russian army is roughly at its closest 13 miles away, 13 miles away. And so there are colleagues who go to the front line where the fighting is, where the shelling is, where the shooting is. Remember, I'm freelance, and I'm very, very grateful to the people who are supporting me on Patreon. My Patreon is John Sweeney Raw, and also I'm crowdfunding a podcast about Putin. Both those, I'm very grateful for people's generosity, but I don't have a big organization that has my back. And secondly, I've got a fixer and a driver, and at the moment I've managed to source a flat jacket and a helmet for myself, but I haven't got it for my guys, and I'm not going to the war, i.e. to the front line, unless everybody's got the kit. Now, I might, now that I've got the proper kit, and I've only got it the other day, I might go, but not with my normal people. But my policy and my philosophy is, I'm 63, and I don't work for a major organization, I'm freelance. It makes sense to me to tell the story of the war from the heart of the city, which means that I'm reducing the risk. There is obviously some risk. A Russian missile could land on my head right now, and that would be the end of me. But also the other thing, which is that what we're doing here is we're telling the world what Vladimir Putin is doing. And the very fact that we're here, all of us, means that he has to exercise more restraint than he would want to. So you take us out, then he can, the war will get much more brutal very, very quickly. So part of our, I mean, it's our job, it's exactly what Daphne Caruana Galizia did. Scrutiny on power is always a good thing. If you take somebody out, you take a journalist out, then power has less scrutiny. And in a war that gets bloody. But so all the three people who've died so far were all, I believe, out on the front line. There's a guy called Brent Renault who was, he was out in Irpin, which is to the northwest of the city. Roughly, this is the closest sector where the Russians have got 13 miles away from where I'm speaking now. He was shot in the neck. The bullet went out through his head, dead. There was another guy with him who was injured, but he survived. He's talking 2 days ago, somewhere else, I think in the West as well. 2 journalists were killed. There's a cameraman, Pierre Zakrzewski, who's got a Polish name, but he was an Irish citizen, and I saw him in the bar. And I probably saw the Ukrainian fixer he was working with, and her name was Sasha Kuvchanova. Pierre was quite a striking guy, had kind of bubbly hair and an imposing presence. And I saw him in the bar. I didn't talk to him, but it's just one of the people. Basically, because of martial law, alcohol is banned. Of course, the journalists have found a bar. It's the only bar that's open, and every evening we go there. The difficulty, Manuel, is curfew's at 8, and when you get into a good session with your colleagues, and part of this is the psychological necessity of dealing with the war, because, you know, certainly when you go to the hospital and you see sick kids who are trapped in the bloody war zone, who can't get out because, for example, if they're on kidney dialysis, they may die, but if they stay, they may die. And you see these people, these children, and it really gets to you. It really gets to me. And what's funny, peculiar, not funny, ha ha, is there are moments when you see this awful stuff and it doesn't get you, and then you see something silly or moving on Twitter, and then I start crying uncontrollably, completely, hours, sometimes days after the thing that's really upset me. So you kind of deal with the obvious thing, and then every now and then something slips underneath you, and it got me. And the thing that got me the other day was there was a video which a friend posted to me, and I put it up on my Twitter, John Sweeney rule, which was two Ukrainian kids, refugees, had arrived for their first day in school in Italy, and all the kids in the school cheered them as they went, in a really beautiful moment of humanity. And Italy can do that so well, and it's just that thing. And I was crying in front of my gang, where Eugene, the world's worst translator, and Vlad, the driver with the dodgy Skoda, and they were kind of, they looked at me, and they've seen me be full on arguing with the Ukrainian soldiers. You can't go there. You're not allowed to film. And I just say, oh, do I look like a Russian spy? And Eugene's always saying, stop being rude to these. But I'm not. They're just. They need to understand that I'm their friend, but I'm telling stories, and I've got a film to tell stories. So Eugene's always going kind of, but they're both very, very good. Vlad's yesterday, he came to my flat in the centre. Now, he lives on the East Bank, and the shelling was so bad he hadn't slept at all. And he came into my room, and he was into my flat, and he was, Manuel, he was shell-shocked. Because, and he's got a missus and two young kids, and he was shell-shocked. And I can't believe in 2022, I'm telling you of a war in Europe where a friend of mine, a guy who drives me around, and I don't pay him much, but I pay him every day, including the days off and all of that. But he's shell-shocked. Dreadful. So it's those human moments. But there's also one other thing, which is that what happens is that something dark happens, and then something funny happens. So yesterday, Eugene introduced me. He's studying English at the university here, and is in a kind of hall of residence for the languages faculty. And one of the other students is this woman called Christina, and she's from Mariupol, where this terrible battle is taking place. And Christina got a phone call from her mum the other day, and it said, we're okay, but the flat is destroyed. And then the phone went dead. And she couldn't sleep, and you could still see the shock and fear on her face. And then yesterday morning, she got a call from her mum. They managed to get out of the siege of Mariupol by walking 4 hours to the next town, and her mum and dad are okay. And then Christina says, and the cat, and they've got the cat out too. They carried the cat in the box. And then we're sitting in this lovely cafe opposite the synagogue, because I'm writing pieces for Stern, the German newspaper, for the South Korean newspaper Chosun, for the Jewish Chronicle, and I'm, as you know, I'm a kind of dodgy Catholic. I'm a lapsed, anyway, never mind that, but I'm not Jewish yet.
Sweeney gives it away.
Everything, bar mitzvahs, I'll do everything. Oy vey. And so opposite the synagogue, there's this lovely milk bar cafe where I go, and we have free coffees, and the staff are lovely. And actually, I've been here a month, and I miss a cuppa. So I said to the beautiful people in the milk bar, I said, could I have tea with cold milk? And Vlad and Eugene kind of just looked horrified. And by the way, and so we brought Christina along partly to cheer up, and also we knew we'd get a free coffee and a bun, all that kind of stuff. So she's there with us, and she's just told this harrowing story about the terrifyingly brief conversation with her mother. And then immediately afterwards, I ordered tea and milk. And then Eugene leans forward and says, "There are other ways of proving you're not a British spy."
or a Russian spy for that.
Yeah, a Russian spy. No, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. But so what happens? There are other ways of proving you're not a Russian spy. And they just looked kind of as if I was poisoning myself as I and I started singing "There'll Always Be in England" while drinking my tea with milk, and virtually the whole place stopped. So what is like, Manuel, is continually like you hear somebody who's terrified for their mum and dad, they've disappeared, and then they pop up and the cat's okay. And then somebody cracks a joke and then you all start laughing. And it's like that all the time. It's exhilarating and exhausting every second.
When you hear of people who have been invaded, you wonder what they think of the people invading them. It's not just, the soldiers and the army that is invading, or Vladimir Putin, who is sort of the person responsible for this. But what are the conversations in these meetings that you're having about Russia, about the Soviet legacy, about Russians, about Russian-speaking Ukrainians?
So, to be honest, I think the mood is getting darker and darker towards Russia. And I've had conversations with good Ukrainian friends where I said, you've got to remember people like Navalny. And I've met Navalny twice. I consider him a friend of mine. And Navalny, of course, is the Russian opposition leader, effectively the leader of the opposition, who's never allowed to run against Putin, who's never allowed to oppose him fairly, who was poisoned with Novichok, who recovered, who went back to Russia, and now he's in jail. And they keep on extending his sentence on nonsensical charges. And there was good evidence that the judge was taking a phone call from the Kremlin to work out exactly how big the sentence would be. That's Russian justice for you. And one of my Ukrainian friends is a good friend, and I like him very much. He said, "Fuck Navalny." So there is a kind of increasing anger with all Russians because of the cruelty of the war. But there are other people here who still get it, and I was very pleased to see that Navalny in prison had managed to smuggle out a message that the war, this war by stupid old men, is destroying Russia, will destroy Russia. So, and the Kyiv Independent, which is a brilliant independent English language newspaper, put that message out. So there is the effect of Putin's war is to make people here in general more anti-Russian. But remember, Kyiv is still a majority Russian-speaking city. All the big cities are. I did Russian at school. I got barely any Ukrainian. People are switching, though. They're switching from spasiba, thank you in Russian, to dziękuję, thank you in Ukrainian. The big thing to get around is, so when you go, like last night it was very tense, and so I obeyed the curfew to the letter, and I was home before the curfew started. Sometimes when the mood, and I'm good at this because I've been to other war zones in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Rwanda, Burundi, the Romanian Revolution in '89. So you read the streets. If there are kind of old ladies walking their dogs, it's kind of okay. If the coppers and the soldiers, and they're mainly National Guardsmen in the centre, in the suburbs and the outskirts, it's more dangerous because of the militia. They're less calm. There can be some crazy guys out there, people say. In the centre, it's the National Guard. They know what they're doing. They're smart. And I wear my orange hat deliberately, so a Ukrainian soldier can see from about a quarter of a mile away that I'm not a threat. And so when we bust the curfew, my journalistic mates, they walk behind me, and then I just go down talking very loudly in my kind of John Cleese style English, Manuel, kind of stuff like this.
Been at the wrong end of that a few times.
Yeah. So, and then the phrase, and they want to see your passport. You show your British passport. By the way, mine is still it's an old British passport, so it's still got the European Union, and I want to talk about that in a minute. Anyway, but what you say is Putin Julio, which means Putin's a poo head, and that the moment you say that in a bad Ukrainian accent, they just say, "Yeah, fine, off you go." So life goes on.
It's not going to be duck à l'orange tonight, but how are the food supplies in the city?
It is going to be. I bought duck and I've got oranges.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
That was a figure of speech. Okay.
No. I bought a duck. So it's a huge city, half the size of London. 4 million people normally, 2 million people now, maybe less. It feels there are very, very few children. There are a lot of old ladies and old guys with dogs, people who don't want to move, people like Vlad, my driver, who can't imagine moving. And so, everybody makes their own decisions. Poor people have less, people who've got money can go and know they can stay in Spain or Italy, France. Britain is way more difficult for unimaginable reasons. But or reasons I have no, I do not think are serious. Britain should do exactly what the European Union has done and said to all Ukrainians with a passport, you're welcome to stay here for 3 years, no questions. That's how it should be. But the city was full of food. It's tins of stuff are easy. Fresh food is more difficult, but I've got 3 or 4 oranges, 4 or 5 lemons. It's not my first rodeo, so I've got pasta and steak and mince and duck in the fridge and tomatoes and lots of chocolate and tea. Where it gets tricky, the electricity is still on, the internet is still on. So I think that no, the war down south is going badly for Ukraine. They're really smashing into Mariupol, where Eugene's friend Christina comes from. They're really smashing into that, and so their aim is basically to take the Black Sea coast, and that knocks Ukraine's ability to sell its grain, to move its grain by ship to the rest of the world. They haven't got Odessa, and Odessa, I've been there. Odessa is a tough town. It's beautiful, but it's tough. It's like Marseille, or Liverpool, or Plymouth, or Southampton. I.e., it's full of fun, but it's also tough. And so I don't think they're going to get it. The smart military people in London and Washington and the Baltic states are saying that basically there's like 300,000 soldiers in Ukraine, 200,000 in the army, then another 100,000 in a kind of various kind of police militia. And then you've got the rest of the country, all of whom are hunters and know what they're doing. And then you've got the tractor drivers, like keep on stealing all these tanks. So to defeat that, the reason I thought the war wouldn't happen was that Putin needed, if you invade, the numbers are something like you need 3 times as many invaders as defenders, at the very least. So you need to defeat an effective fighting force of 300,000. You need 900,000. You need 1 million. He's actually sent in 200,000, and the Ukrainians may be exaggerating, but there are people in Britain, defense people, who say that maybe a quarter have gone, something like 40,000, or 50,000, gone in terms of wounded, captured, run away, because it's not their war. I mean, it's a noble desertion in my view. It's not a mutiny. It's not their war. It's not Russia's war. It's not the soldiers' war. It's Putin's war. It's the Kremlin's war. And you can keep on saying this because of the abandoned kit. Now, yes, of course, Ukrainian tractor drivers are great, but actually it also means that somebody else has been brave. A Russian soldier has said, you know what, I'm not driving this tank. I'm getting out. I'm going away, slipping off into the woods. And there is something amazing about that. So that whereas now, and the other element, my friend Michael Weiss is on this story. He's on Twitter at Michael Weiss, and he is he runs a show pretty much at New Lines magazine. But essentially, the story he's working on is that Russia is corrupt, and the Russian army is corrupt. And what's happened is Putin thinks he's got, one army group has got 150 tanks, and it's only got 50 tanks because the Russian generals have pocketed the money for the other 100. So that whereas the Ukrainian army may only have 30 tanks, but it really does have 30 tanks, and the guys in those tanks aren't running away. So that suddenly the numbers, the mass, isn't there. Now in war, quantity is quality, and everybody thought that the Russians would be smashing Kyiv in a matter of days. The lights are still on, the internet is still on, I'm still here talking to you. And after 21 days, that means to me that the blitzkrieg against Kyiv has failed. Big time. They have got 13 miles, that's as close as they've got, but now it feels like they've stopped and they're not moving forwards. Between me and the bar where we go drinking, there's about 7 checkpoints. And I have to, the hat, Putin's a poo head in Ukrainian, I have to talk my way through and show my passport to each of those 7 checkpoints between me and that bar. Imagine how much, the Russians are going to have an awful lot of trouble. Now, what they can do is sit outside the city limits and hit the place with artillery, and they're doing that. There was a shell that landed in an apartment block near the zoo where I've been, but most people were down in the basement. Good, so that I don't think anyone's been killed. There may be more updates. It takes a bit of time for the news to filter through, and remember, because there's curfew, journalists can't go out and see what's happening. But having said all that, I think this is the hinge of battle, and the Russian momentum has stopped, and I think the war may be turning against them in Kyiv. But Kyiv is critical.
One last question, John. Is there a conversation going on about what Putin's next move might be?
I was hoping the Ides of March would go. So he's in a box. He leaves the Kremlin in a box, I think, in a coffin. He can't, after doing this, he can't retire gracefully to his dasher in the countryside. That's not an option. But it's his war. He started it, and it's been shown to be a huge mistake. Even if he takes Kyiv, and I don't think that's happening, but even if he does, he's made a terrible mistake. And far too many Russian lives have been lost, and far too many Ukrainian lives have been lost. He has effectively reversed all of the economic gains that Russia has made in the last 3 decades. So from the end of the Soviet Union, that Russia is heading in terms of, as a society, you cannot go on holiday anywhere nice. You can't, you can go to North Korea, lucky them. You can, the Pyongyang Riviera isn't a touch. It's like Saint-Tropez in Pyongyang is not a thing. So the oligarchs will hate him for that. Ordinary Russians can see They can't get into McDonald's because it's closed. The Russian ruble is tanking. So I think this is Gotterdammerung for Putin. I think it's twilight. He can linger for a time. He's a cunning player. But the Ukrainians, Zelensky he's a human being and he's a humanitarian. He wants the war to stop. Maybe they can they'll give him something to make him go away. I'm beginning. My view is that if the battle turns in Kyiv and the Russian army starts going backwards, then their successes in the south can be reversed, and as we see, for example, the first journalists who get into Mariupol, if that happens, then it becomes impossible for the West to do anything other than maintain the harshest sanctions while Putin is in the Kremlin. So weirdly, he's in trouble. And also, and this is a point everybody in Malta should take note, his proxies and Russian dark money has been polluting Londongrad and the sewers that run to the big sewer in Londongrad. One of those sewers runs through Malta, and suddenly Russian money, Russian dark money, is in trouble. And that means that all of the corruption they've been generating in places like London and in Malta is now in trouble. Those proxies will start worrying. Their capital is its value has halved overnight. I hate this war. I hate the suffering I've seen, but it's enabled the West and the European Union and people in Britain and the States to see the true nature of the Kremlin in a way that they've never seen before, and that is a good thing. And it means also that those of us like you and like Daphne Caruana Galizia, bless her memory, who identified that the fight to defend democracy was not being fought properly, that democracy was not being truly defended, were right. So now it is the time for the other side of the argument to know fear.
John, I'll let you go back to the many newspapers that depend on you now, and to your Dakar Orange. And I hope to see you in the next few days. Stay safe.
Yes, take care, old boy. Love to Malta, and boy, I want to go to one of your fantastic restaurants and just kind of eat everything, and we're going to do that
as soon as can be.